I was going someplace just to sign autographs, and people had stood in line for the autograph. I had come in a limousine, and this place was paying me $1,000 to do it. And I got behind the desk, and there wasn't a Sharpie. And it was the second time that I had asked. For the first time I went out to do this, my producer just had a regular pen, and I said, hey, Sharpie, I like to sign with Sharpies. So the second time he did it, I thought it was entirely reasonable to fire him. So he was unemployed then, and my partner said, did you just really fire Tom over the weekend? And I said, yeah. And he said, why? And I said, the guy didn't bring me a Sharpie. This is the second time. And he looked at me and he went, you are out of your mind. You know, there's nothing more corrosive than fame and fortune. It is battery acid to the soul.
Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. Glenn, thanks so much for joining me.
Let's make a nice one, Glenn.
Yeah, take a smile today.
Glenn, to your right. Last look. Hello, America. Hello, America. Hello, America. Welcome to the program.
I mean, there's something when you're 16 years old and people who are very accomplished in the business say to other people and you happen to hear it, look at this kid. If this kid is this now, imagine what he'll be when he's, 25. That screws you up because you're like, dig me.
I hear him chatting the noise, move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the
I was a monster by the time I was 30. I was an alcoholic, smoked pot every day of my life. My motto was, I hate people. I was so full of myself and so out of control. It's a joke now when I ask for a pen or a pencil or something. Everybody who's worked with me for a long time are like, better be a Sharpie. You know what I'm saying? I lived most of my life out of fear. At the same time that I was going through alcoholism, I realized I didn't know anything. So I started just searching everything, and I read a letter from Thomas Jefferson to Peter Carr. Peter Carr was his nephew, and Thomas writes this unbelievable letter on what you have to do to be a well-educated man. He talked about mathematics, science, philosophy, everything else. The last one is religion. And it said, above all things, when it comes to religion, fix reason firmly in her seat, and question with boldness even the very existence of God. For if there be a God, he must surely rather honest questioning over blindfolded fear. Wow. But the key word here, and it's the word that I think we all miss, is honest. He must surely rather honest questioning over blindfolded fear. And I realized almost all questions that I asked myself about anything that I believed was a question that would get me to where I wanted to go. It was not an honest question. And so I decided I don't know anything, take it all out and question everything.
Please welcome to the show, Mr. Glenn Beck. You guys can applaud.
It's always good when you have to cue the audience to.
Hey, it's their first time.
Glenn Beck. Oh, gee. Oh, I mean, yes.
So Glenn, I like to start at the beginning. So tell me about young Glenn, where you grew up, your parents, your family.
Grew up in Mount Vernon, Washington, little town. We owned a bakery. I started working with my dad in back of the bakery at 8. My sisters and mom worked at the front of the bakery. Growing up at a time when the malls were just starting to hit and kind of robbed our little small town, and we were losing its way of life. And everybody in town decided they wanted to be anti-mall. And I remember my folks saying, that is not going to work. You're not going to stop progress. It's not going to work. And so they said we should do something unique with our town. And we lived in Mount Vernon, Washington, and it had a bend in the river, the Skagit River, just like Mount Vernon, Virginia. And the bicentennial was about 5 years away. And they said we should make our town, Mount Vernon, Washington, into a little colonial town. And it was crazy. If you go there today, you'll still see half of it is kind of colonial, half of it is not. Nobody could agree. And I think that's where a lot of me came from, was that beginning of growing up, seeing life changing as it always does, trying to preserve something while not being against something else. And my love for history, I think, kind of started there,
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
What were you into growing up?
Radio. Really? I mean, I was really into entertainment. I was a weird kid, had braces on my legs and braces on my face, and very popular. And I was sitting in my house with the old olive green shag carpeting and the TV set that my mom would say I'd get eye cancer from for sitting so close. And she came into the living room, and there's like 4 sunny days a year in Seattle. And I'm watching TV, and it's sunny outside, and it's in the summer. And she comes in, and she turns off the TV, and she said, "Go outside and play." And I got up, and I mumbled under my breath something as I walked by her, and she said, "What did you just say?" And I said, "You had TV when you were a kid." And she said, "No, we didn't have TV when I was a kid." And I thought, Wilma Flintstone has a TV. What are you talking about? How old are you? And she said, we had radio. And she described an old radio that my grandfather had bought that had a green tube and a green eye, a sleepy eye in the center. And the tube would light up and the green eye would glow. She said we would turn off the lights and we would listen, and it was magical. And she said, this is far more powerful than your eyes and television. And so on my birthday, she gave me a record album, and it was the golden years of radio. And I listened to Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy, and Fibber McGee's Closet, and George Burns and Gracie Allen, stuff that lasts still today. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then I listened to Top 40 radio. I was like, whoa, none of this exists.
The disc jockey became an institution, and radio an automated talk and song marathon.
You're the very, very biggest in the entire nation. We feel so great about it. Now, from now until midnight tonight, we're on our party, and I know you're listening all over America, all over Canada, and it's really great. Now, at 9:30 tonight, a special Beatles segment like we have every Saturday. The Beatles will share the spotlight with the Dave Clark 5.
I got into radio when I was 13. I worked 3 stations at once, and I would ride my bike from station to station. I was fired by all 3 stations on the same Monday. The rock station, at that time I was prone to migraines, and I had this migraine I just couldn't take. So it's like 11 o'clock, and I'm thinking, who's up at 11 o'clock listening to the radio? And so I got on the air and I said, I have a really bad migraine. Call me if you're listening. If you don't call, then I'm just going to go home. I shut the transmitter off and I go home. The next day, I have to do the noon news. It was a time when we were going through popes and we were going through the Russian, premieres all the time. And so I'm literally 13 years old, and I'm like, and President Zelensky I mean, I had no idea what I'm doing. And then the last one, same kind of thing. But what's funny is they all called my mom. And my mom had to fire me.
Everyone who has a job in radio, please stand up. Glenn, sit down.
We were looking for a place that was off the grid in the middle of nowhere.
I love it.
So this was actually one of, if not the first, settler's cabin. And it was from around 1880. The stove is from 1882, and it's in perfect condition. And the cabin was in one of the fingers of the mountain, and the previous owner brought it out here, but it was in some disrepair, and we just spent about 2 years putting it back together. This is my great-great-grandmother who crossed the Rocky Mountains, lost an eye on the trip across the mountains, and kind of just, I don't know, brushed it off or picked it up. I don't know what you do when you lose an eye, but just said, come on, let's keep going. She was a tough woman. This is the stove, and the stove, 1882. And as we were putting this in, and gosh, I wish it wasn't. Let me just clean this up. Let me just clean this up before we go in this. The stove is from 1882. It's in perfect working condition. It's been in this cabin probably since 1882. How exciting it must have been when, I don't even know, Wells Fargo or whoever was delivering that, and how far friends would have had to come to see the new stove, you know?
Then what got you in the top 40? So you started listening to it, you heard they're missing something, you thought you could add something?
I listened to a guy named Charlie Brown, and I loved him. I just thought he was really, really good. And I wanted to be like him. And by the time I was 16, I sent in a tape to his station he was programming. And it was in Seattle, and it was the #1 station in Seattle. And I'll never forget, he called me in the morning. And I was asleep, and it was a school day. I pick up the phone, and he said, "Can I speak to Glenn Beck, please?" And I said, "This is?" And he said, "Mr. Beck, Charlie Brown." And I said, "Shut up." And I hung up the phone. He calls me back a few minutes later, and he said, "I'm going to try this one more time. Is this Glenn Beck?" And I said, "Dear God, this is really Charlie Brown, isn't it?" And he said, "Yeah. Love your tape. Want to meet with you. Can you come on down?" I said, "Sure." I think I was 15 because my dad had to drive me down. I walked in, and he was like, and Charlie was like, "Is your dad coming?" And I'm like, "No, he's waiting in the car." And he's like, "Well, shouldn't I be talking to your dad?" And I'm like, well, "I guess you could." He thought my dad would be me, and he hired me. I would watch him do his morning show and just learn from him. He was just a master. I'll never forget, he was holding the weather forecast in his hand, and he said, "Seattle area weather, let me see." And he rustled the paper a bit. Hang on, and then he read it.
The forecast showers heavy at times with occasional thunderstorms.
He had it in his hand the whole time. And I said, "Why did you just do that?" And he said, "A good, entertaining morning show," he said, "it has to feel like a house of cards." He said, "It has to sway. Collapse is never good." He said, "But it has to sway and feel like, it's a little out of control." And so he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot.
You bounced around a bit at Top 40, and you talk about sort of being a different person during this time, drinking, smoking weed all the time. Any particular point you remember where you just bottomed out?
Incredible. Can I have you step a little bit this way so I also get the stove?
There's something when you're 16 years old and people who are very accomplished in the business say to other people, and you happen to hear it, "Look at this kid. If this kid is this now, imagine what he'll be when he's, 25. That screws you up. I was programming a station by the time I was 18, doing mornings. You know, I was one of those morning zoo kind of jocks.
You know, can I have you leaning on the wall, like super casual? Amazing.
I started to approach my 30s, and nothing had meaning. I was an alcoholic, smoked pot every day of my life, was miserable. Used to tell people that my motto was, I hate people. Just horrible and empty. Successful, but horrible and empty. That was the beginning of the end. And I remember it was 11:59 the night of my 30th birthday. When it turned 12, I was going to be 30. Do you remember the old red digital clocks? And if you looked at them, it looked like the numbers sometimes were kind of jumping, you know? And I remember watching those numbers, and it may be because I was drunk, but they looked like, in my memory, they were moving. And it flipped to midnight, and I distinctly heard in my head, your life is about to change. And for the next 5 years, it was hell. Everything fell apart. I mean, I was running 3 stations, most of them right into the ground. And nobody knew, except probably my best friend and my wife. I used to tell these stories of my kids about Inky, Stinky, and Blinky, the 3 little mice that would build marshmallow boats and go to the island of cheese where it would snow Parmesan. And Thomas the cat would come and he would try to get him, and they'd jump on their marshmallow boat just at the right time and their boat would sail away back home. So I'd make these stories up every night as I was tucking me into bed. And we were in the kitchen and we sat down and my kids came racing in and they said, Dad, last night was the best Inky, Blinky, and Stinky story ever. Tell us again, tell us again. And I realized not only did I not remember the story, I didn't even remember putting them to bed. And so I went to AA that night. And it was in a little town in Connecticut. And I remember it was in the basement of this Unitarian church. Everybody was dressed nicely and everybody looked successful. And they asked for anybody new, and somebody pointed me out and I said, hi, I'm Glenn. I'm not sure if I'm an alcoholic. And everybody laughed. They said, why? And I said, well, I can't stop drinking, but I'm confused now because I don't know what an alcoholic is because none of you look like alcoholics. And they laughed even harder. And this old woman, she had to be 80, and she had this perfect little sweater set and pearls around her, and perfectly white hair. And she just sat there. She didn't even turn around. She was right in front of me. And she said, oh, honey, we're all drunks in here. And I realized I'm an alcoholic. An alcoholic. My mind is my worst enemy, you know, because it knows me. It knows me, and it knows exactly what doors to go in and go. Somebody gave me the advice on alcoholism, Glenn, when you least expect it, expect it. And I said, what does that mean? He said, you will find yourself in a situation where it will become perfectly reasonable to drink. And he said, that's because your mind knows all of your little trapdoors, and it knows how to play it.
During that time, you started exploring some religious thoughts. Tell us about sort of exploring that.
It is now okay to talk about life elsewhere or intelligent life elsewhere, whereas a decade or 2 ago, it wasn't okay.
I had just been reading Carl Sagan because I thought, I don't know anything. I don't know if God exists. And I was reading Demon Haunted World. He had said something, he was making comparisons to the Catholic Church. I grew up Catholic, but I hadn't been into a Catholic church in I don't know how long, 20 years, easy. And I certainly was not living like a Catholic. And I'm reading this, and I snap the book closed, and I throw it down on the bed. And it was some emotional thing that all of a sudden I was defending the Catholic Church against this atheist. And I stood there and I thought, where did that come from? And I thought, I am so programmed, and I don't even know if God exists. And so I decided, I'm going to be agnostic. I don't know anything. So I was pro-choice, I was all of the easy answers. My father taught me once that if you can read as if everything is transparent, and you can look down through all of them, where it intersects, where they're all saying the same thing, that's truth. Take that truth, disregard everything else, that is true. And I would go to the bookstore and I would look at who is on the opposite end of this belief. And I used it kind of as a counsel. I would read both sides and I'd just keep reading in. And I did that for almost 10 years, read about 7,000 books, and discovering I'm a moron. The more you read, the more you're like, hello, moron. I was at the end of my rope on my alcoholism. This is probably 96 or 7. And I was carrying so much baggage of the things that I had done in the past. And I get down on my knees and I'm praying because I do believe in God. I just don't believe in religion. I said, look, I'm not able to hold it anymore. And I've done my part and I can't do it anymore. And you need to throw a roadblock in my way. Because I'm telling you right now, next Thursday, I'm going to my favorite bar and I'm ordering Jack and Coke. You have 1 week. Next day I'm at work and I'm out in the parking lot and this girl gets out of her car and she's going in to do something in the radio station and she passes and she stops and she comes back. She said, are you Glenn Beck? And I said, yeah. She said, I just want to thank you for the laughs for all the years. And I said, thank you. I asked her name and she said, Tanya Colonna. Didn't think twice about it. I'm at this charity event. I'm giving away a car. I'm a miserable person. Everyone should be miserable. If I pull your name out, you lose. Last one in the bowl wins, okay? And so I'm pulling and everybody's like, oh, and I keep pulling names. I finally pull hers. She comes up and she's so sweet and so kind and she said, thank you very much. It was a really nice time. And she just, goes away. So it's Thursday the next week and I'm driving in my car and I am ripping God apart. Not me, dude, it's you. I told you, it's you. And I can't do it. All I asked was for a simple freaking roadblock. That's it, just one thing. Help me out. Can't you help me out? No, not my problem. I'm going in and I'm ordering a double Jack Daniels. Got it? I walk in, go to the bar, ask the bartender for a Jack Daniels. He pours it, he puts it on the table. I pick it up and I turn around and across the room is Tanya. And I realize that the Lord answered my prayer the very next morning. I was too stupid to see it. We end up together, and I ask her to marry me, and she says, no. And I said, why not? She said, because we don't have faith in common. So we started going on what I call a church tour. And we went to everything. We went Judaism, we went everywhere. We went to a place that I thought there's absolutely no way I'm ever. I did it as a favor to a friend because they said, I thought you were honestly turning over every stone. And I was like, oh, you are the worst. And I went, and Tanya and I sat and I listened, and I realized you can ask questions here. And I was loaded with questions. And so for 6 months, I was reading their doctrine, their Mormon doctrine. I'd read it and I'd highlight it. And I'd just laugh and I'd go, if they believe this is true, then they must believe this is true. And I'd come over and they'd go, yeah, we do. And so it was all consistent. And I'm a consistency freak. But I still couldn't join because I don't want to be, hey, I want to be an outcast. And I saw a guy who I had, to my shame forever, had called the first time that I met him behind his back, the amazing Mr. Plastic Man and his amazing plastic family. Comes all assembled, and they're happy all the time. And I'm like, nobody's that happy. He was teaching one day, and he said, gentlemen, the concept of Zion is heaven on earth. Even if I do know you, but I don't like you, I have found a way to love you. And I can see you truly as my brother. And I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and I love you. And when he said that, I realized he was the most genuine man I had ever met. He was genuinely happy. He had found a way to live that. And I remember thinking, I don't care if they make me drink chicken blood. I want to be like that. And so we joined, and I was baptized, and my whole life changed.
And professionally, you're still in radio, and how'd you get to CNN? Were you looking to get on TV?
No, this was the craziest thing. I was looking to do something in entertainment because I was mocking all of the stuff. And CNN called. They explained everything, and I said, guys, I don't want to waste your time. It's very nice of you, but I've said from the beginning, I'm not interested. The head guy said, why don't you want to do this? And I just didn't care enough, and I said, have you watched cable news? And he was like, well, yeah. And I said, it's awful. It's awful. I don't want to do that. And he said, why don't you put something together that you would want to do? And so I did. And they said yes. And when they said yes, we were all like, oh crap, they said yes. And so I did 2 years there. And then I was getting out, and Roger Ailes called. And Roger was brilliant. Not necessarily a good guy, but brilliant, and brilliant at playing people. You know, he knew exactly what to say. He could be one guy to one person, another guy to another person. And I think part of that was all slices of him. So I was lucky enough to only see the good parts. And I learned so much there, so much. Good and bad, both places.
What made you decide to leave Fox and start your own thing?
You know, there's nothing more corrosive than fame and fortune. It is battery acid to the soul. And I'd already lost my soul once, and I knew who I owed my success to. Thank God I was a monster in my 20s, because had I had that power and that money and that access, without the experience of my 20s, God only knows. My wife and I took about 4 months to decide to leave Fox. I go home, and I'm on the 56th floor, I think, of the Bloomberg building. I have a quarter of that, a 260-degree view of Manhattan. Dream come true of mine. And all the lights are off in the house, and I walk in, and it's just the city aglow. And I walk in, and I walk right up to that glass, and I said, how can this be God's plan, that I just leave here? Look at the access we have. Look at the things that we can do. We're at the top right now, and it's just starting. And I'm so lucky I was married to the right woman. She said, I am going to bed. And I put my head against the glass, and I'm just looking down at my dream. And I hear overwhelmingly, if you don't leave now, you will not leave with your soul. Done. Went to bed, got up the next day. I'm doing my own thing.
So what do you do next?
Happy Monday, Glenn.
Happy Monday to you, Sarah.
The top story is this.
Basically burning books. They're deleting people. If I disagree with you on one thing, I have to hate you.
Yeah.
And now look how wonderful that's going.
We're at the end game.
And because I'm thinking to myself, what the hell are you doing?
Took this place from an old movie studio and made it digital, and start a TV network online when buffering was still a part of our lives. It took me a year to build a radio studio in New York City. It took me 2 weeks to build a control room and update this place and make it all digital. And that really said, welcome to Texas, freedom. Then just started doing a show and learning the hard way. You're not going to compete with cable news because A, it was too early, and B, that's not what you're supposed to do. That's not the future. And that took me a long time of getting kicked in the face to get.
So, and that's The Blaze, right? Your network's called The Blaze. And so how long is that? Everyone would think Glenn Beck has everything, but you've risked it all many times. How long was the period of time between when you started and when it really started clicking?
8 or 9 years. I put $19 million of my own money into this. I'm not going to see that back, you know. It was a hard lesson. We have some exciting people going to be joining us. We're already the largest conservative outpost behind Fox News. We're way behind Fox News, but we're the number 2 position. It's a good place to be. I would say all of our problems stem from not understanding the power of the individual. Yeah. We're not realizing that almost everything we think, you thought, you know? First time I read Plato, I was like, oh my gosh, they've been asking the same questions that I'm asking for thousands of years, and we're not that different in our fears.
There's a psychiatrist I do a lot of work with, Dr. Ned Hallows, and he says when you think about something by yourself, it becomes worry. When you think it over discussion, it becomes progress.
You know, when you do my job, you can forget that people are actually listening because you're in a room all by yourself. You can also at the same time start to buy your own bullcrap. Like, I'm doing something important here. Really, are you? They start kidnapping the Christians over in the Middle East. And somebody asks if they can get this nun on my show because the Congress at the time was wanting her to testify, but the Obama administration was blocking a visa for her to come and testify what was happening with the Christians. And they knew if she could get on my show, there would be some political pressure and maybe she would be allowed to testify. So I said, sure. I mean, that was how much I rolled up my sleeves. Sure. And I'm sitting in my studio, which is 16,000 square feet, 4 stories in the middle of Texas in summer at a comfortable 57 degrees, okay? And I'm just sitting in my chair. I want to talk to this nun who's overseas. So tell me about your plight, sister. And I see her for the first time on this satellite image. And she starts talking about the plight.
Lots of people stayed in our hometowns, and they were asked to convert or to get killed, and they chose to get killed, and they kept their faith. They did not want to convert to Islam or even to pay ransom, what you call it, or whatever.
She just almost fades out to me, and I'm just looking at her. All I think of is she actually believes something. The next day, Johnny Moore comes in, maybe a week later. And Johnny Moore says to me, I just left my job with Mark Burnett. I just heard about what was going on in the Middle East and the Christians. And so I just went to the airport and bought a ticket, and I flew over because I wanted to see it myself and blah, blah, blah. Glenn, it's really bad. And again, I'm like, look at how pathetic I am. You just quit your job and got onto a plane. I'd never do that.
Iraq a lot, but just 4 years ago in Syria, there were 2 million Christians. There are only 400,000 left. It's only a matter of time.
And so he said, we have to raise money to help these people. And he said, I'm working with somebody and we're going to need some money to get these people out. And I said, just blurted out on the air, we're going to raise $1 million right now. And we're going to go in and rescue those people. We started the Nazarene Fund and decided that we needed to start a movement that could go through the churches and wake the Christians up. And so I said, let's go to Birmingham and let's march for real civil rights. 30,000 people came. I said, we're going to raise another $1 million by the end of December. By the end of December, 3 months later, we had $26 million. And we had volunteers who were going over there going, I'm going to save me some Christians. And we thought we should probably get a little more serious about this. And so we hired really brilliant people. One of the guy who runs it now was on the National Security Council. And we have moved, I think, 30,000 people out of troubled areas, 10,000 to different countries when no one wanted anyone from the Middle East.
And a good number of people around the world are like, how can you possibly do this? You're going to bring in bad people, and you're going to, you're taking these refugees.
We in the end leave with documentation. We have passports and we have driver's licenses and baptism certificates. We've done interviews with intelligence experts. I mean, so we have.
We had to tell the first countries, we'll not only move them, we're not going to dump them on your shores. We will vet them, we will move them, we will set them up, we will pay their rent for the first 2 years, and we will give them cultural and language lessons. Thank God for Australia. They came to trust us, that we have follow through, and they're one of the countries that we can call at any time we've had problems and somebody's got to get out right now. They'll take them every time.
I just finished another book called Lincoln's Gamble that just reemphasized what that was a hellacious experience. People don't realize when he put that Emancipation Proclamation out, that was hugely risky, right?
Huge.
It was not what he signed up to do, and it could have lost the cause completely.
Yeah. The despair of what do you want? Yeah. He had to be brought down to that position.
That's right. Yeah. He was humbled to the lowest.
Yeah.
Wanting the world to wake up to what's going on, and 2 million children are sex slaves. I go back to 19th century America to the slave problem, and we congratulate ourselves. We eradicated slavery. It's bullcrap. We've not eradicated it. It's estimated that there's over 2 million children currently forced to be sex slaves, raped for money. That's a lot of sick, twisted pedophiles.
This is much more common than we would think, and I just couldn't understand it. Tim called me one day and he says, Glenn, I think we can help solve this. Will you meet with me? I come into a room where he is set up and there's all these guys around, and he tells me his vision. So we raised the first $1 million to open up OUR, which is this amazing organization. My attorney was sitting next to me. He said, you're not doing that. That's, how dangerous, how many legal. And I said, there is nothing that the Lord will protect more than people who are helping the defenseless and the children. Freeing slaves, I think everyone, if it's moral, clean, and righteous, and nobody's making money, nobody's doing deals, nothing, if it's super clean, prepare to see the parting of the Red Sea. On the other hand, if it's dirty, prepare to see lightning bolts in your life. We've seen the parting of the Red Sea.
Operation Underground Railroad is a fairly new organization, just over 2 years old, but it's captured a lot of media attention with its missions to rescue child slaves throughout the world.
Since its inception, a little over 2 years ago, they've helped authorities arrest 157 people in 12 different countries.
this thing got so big, and I said, we have to focus on what we do best.
I give you my word, we will raise $1 million to help you.
We'll continue to raise money for it, but they know what they're doing, and if we could lock that piece in, we should do that. No, I didn't get up any day in my life and went, you know what, we're going to go free slaves. It's just something that we kind of fell into. How can we be the country we're supposed to be? How can we come together? The work of the United States of America is the work expressed in our Declaration. We have to heal the wounds of the nation and finish this work. We didn't finish the work of ending slavery. There was 12 million slaves over the 400-year slave trade. 12 million over 400 years. There's over 50 million slaves today. What are we doing arguing about slavery that none of us participated in 150 years ago? It's like standing in a room that's, the whole building is on fire. And you're like, well, I want the couch moved over there. But he came in last week and said, no, the couch has to be there. The building's on fire. We're tearing each other apart because we've never hit that goal. And the only way to do that is to actually be those people striving for that every day. We're never going to strive for that if we don't get out from our own selves. We're punishing our own selves because of our ego, our arrogance, our anger towards slights one way or another. We have a chance to heal ourselves and finish this great work.
I know I, for one, will enjoy watching as you continue to write the ending. Thanks for joining me. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Beck.
Hope that was okay.
Thank you. What do you say to that person who's sitting there and just they're just seeing it, they're currently horrified. They're going to go through the stages of anger and grief. What do you do next now that you know this exists?
Spread the message, and everybody thinks, and that's the biggest lie I think in America today, is everybody's waiting for somebody else to do it. Or they think that they have to have the voice, or they think that they have to have somebody else. No. Whatever it is you can do, that's what you're supposed to do.